Hi, welcome back to My Smart Learning. This is your last lesson on respiration today. We're looking at anaerobic respiration. This is a real quick fire lesson. It's not very long at all, but it's useful for year 12s and year 13s for your A-level biology, and so anybody in year 11 doing separates biology, and if you're interested in doing A-level biology, this might be useful for you too. Right, before we crack on to anaerobic respiration, we've looked at aerobic respiration. This is the learning objective today. How do I release energy to survive when there's no air? It's because anaerobic respiration is respiration without oxygen. This happens in the cytoplasm, whereas aerobic respiration happens, the beginning stage, the glycolysis bit happens in the cytoplasm too, but the rest of it is inside the mitochondria. Before we start though, you want your recall quiz, you want your virtual high five obviously, because you can't buy those in the shop. So let's have a quick go at these questions. Number one, what are the 4 stages of aerobic respiration? Number 2, what is the main product of glycolysis? Number 3, what is the main product of the link reaction? Number 4, what is the main product of Krebs cycle? And number 5, what is the purpose of oxygen? So press pause, have a go at those questions, and if you've had a go, then unpause the video and we'll go through the answers now. So number 1, what are the 4 stages of respiration? Well, we've already mentioned some here. There's the answers. Didn't even think of that. Right, you got glycolysis, you got the link reaction, you got the Krebs cycle, and the last one is the electron transport chain, or also known as the oxidative phosphorylation. That's question 1. Number 2, the main product of glycolysis is pyruvate. Pyruvate is the end product of that, but also you do get other things. You get some reduced NAD, you get some ATP out of it as well. Main product of the link reaction, well, it's acetyl coenzyme A. That's what you need from it, acetyl coenzyme A. You also get reduced NAD from that as well, and you also get carbon dioxide from it as well. But the main thing is the acetyl coenzyme A. Number 4, what's the main product of the Krebs cycle? Again, it's reduced NAD. That's the main one you want, but there is also reduced FAD. But you also get carbon dioxides coming off there. You also get some ATP coming off there too. And that's the Krebs cycle. And then what is the purpose of oxygen in the electron transport chain? Oxygen is the final electron acceptor. Remember I told you guys must learn that sentence, because that is the end of the show when it comes to aerobic respiration, and you're pretty much guaranteed to always get a question about that when it comes up with respiration questions. Okay, now what do I need to know for today? You need to know, explain how energy is released by respiration in the absence of oxygen, i.e. anaerobic respiration. Explain how ethanol is produced by anaerobic respiration, and explain how lactate is produced by anaerobic respiration. Simples, right, not much to do today. Very quick fire lesson. So if there isn't enough oxygen around, you're going to have to go down the route of anaerobic respiration. Very inefficient, because remember, glycolysis will only give you 2 ATPs. You have to use 2 at the beginning, you get them making 4, but 4 take away 2 gives you 2. So you only end up with 2 after all of that work. So not much. Therefore, not very effective at keeping you alive. So in animals then, what is happening? So in animals, your pyruvate, okay, reacts with, because there's no oxygen, your pyruvate will react with reduced NAD. The reduced NAD, remember, has a hydrogen attached to it. That hydrogen then will go and jump onto the pyruvate. That pyruvate now will become lactate. That lactate then will eventually become lactic acid. Okay, but the equation for anaerobic respiration is that pyruvate will become lactate, because the reduced NAD will become oxidized because it loses the oxygen. That's why it becomes oxidized NAD, because the hydrogen jumps from there and jumps onto there, and therefore you get lactate. Now, that's in animals. So if you keep running and running and running and running and running, so when you watch that movie Forrest Gump, if you don't know who that is, Tom Hanks, a long time ago, when life used to be like a box of chocolates, in the part of that movie he keeps running and running and running. He runs from one coast of America to the other coast of America, and he keeps going back and forth. He pretty much runs the entire globe. Is that possible? No, because lactate will build up, it will form lactic acid, and it will cause cramping and soreness in the muscles. Your muscles will eventually cramp up and you will collapse. Because you might think you're a hero if you go around running around Hansel Park. You might do one lap, think, oh, I'm fine. You run 2 laps, oh, I'm fine. Suddenly your body starts to get achy and tired and stuff like that. And your muscles start to cramp and get tightened up and stuff. It's because of lactate becoming lactic acid. Okay? And that's from anaerobic respiration. What about in plants and in yeast? Well, again, pyruvate made from glycolysis. Well, what happens to that glycolysis, the pyruvate from glycolysis? Again, you got your reduced NAD. That was made, both of these guys were made in glycolysis. Well, that again will get oxidized because it will give its hydrogen onto the pyruvate. But also the pyruvate will break down and it will lose the carbon dioxide. So the pyruvate loses carbon dioxide, it gains a hydrogen, and it becomes ethanol. You've lost the carbon dioxide, so that's why there's got carbon dioxide there, and the reduced NAD has now become oxidized NAD because the hydrogen has jumped from there to there and the carbon dioxide has jumped off. Where have you seen this kind of reaction before? Plants, yeast, fermentation. Fermentation. What is fermentation? Fermentation makes alcohol. It's a biological method of making ethanol, alcohol, in drinks. So things like grapes. Grapes, if you ferment grapes, you get what kind of alcoholic drink? That's right, wine. Do it to red grapes or black grapes, you get red wine. You do it to green grapes. No, you don't get green wine. Who says green wine? There's no such thing as green wine. You get white wine. Okay, so although it's not actually white, colourless or yellowish. Anyway, so that is fermentation. So if you ferment potatoes, for instance, you'll get vodka. If you ferment barley and hops, you get beer. If you ferment rice, you get something called sake, which is in Japan. They have an alcoholic drink from rice. If you ferment malt, I think you get whiskey or something like that. So I'm no expert. So that's the fermentation process, making alcohol from yeast and plants. So to summarize then, let's again, what's the yield? Here's glucose. It goes through that little glycolysis, remember? Glycolysis will end up giving me 2 ATPs as a net effect because 2 is used to break it up to phosphorylate it. Phosphorylated glucose gets split. The glucose gets split, remember? Then it gets turned into 2 lots of TP. The TP then will become oxidized because they're going to lose hydrogen. The NAD then becomes reduced. And this is also the ATP gets made. So you get 2 lots of ATP from each pyruvate. So there's my pyruvate, there's my pyruvate. But in animals, the pyruvate will oxidize the NAD because the reduced NAD will give the pyruvate the hydrogen. That pyruvate now becomes lactate and then eventually lactic acid. For plants though, the pyruvate loses the carbon dioxide. It gains the hydrogen as well from the NAD, from the reduced NAD, gives it the hydrogen, and therefore it becomes ethanol and carbon dioxide. Again, yield, not good. Each pyruvate will give you 2 ATPs. So one glucose molecule will give you 4 ATPs in total because you've got 2 from each pyruvate. So you've only got you only get 2 ATPs in total because you've got to remember each branch, you break 2 there and then you get 4 at the bottom, so you get 4 ATPs, but because you used up 2, you'll only get 2 in total. So it's not very efficient at all. So that's it. Anaerobic respiration. There's some exam style questions for you, some questions for you there. I told you that was going to be a quick and easy one today. That's going to be the end of my smart learning for A-level biology for a while because we are ahead of schedule. So we've covered all of chapter 9 and 10, which is the end of year 12 work. Miss is also doing Zoom lessons on chapter 9 and 10 to consolidate all that learning. I pretty much finished all my topics as well when we did the heart stuff. If we have a chance, when we do tutorial lessons back at school, I'll go through any extra bits that we need to go through. But as of now, what I'm going to start doing is I'll start posting on Show My Homework exam papers for you guys to have a go at in particular areas. And then you can work through that. it's just to give you guys a bit of time to catch up with your notes, catch up with your summary questions, catch up with your exam style questions from the end of the chapter, so everybody's at the same point, so we're not just steamrolling ahead. We're really doing good for time. We're not that far, we're actually pretty much bang on time because we've done 2 chapters now from the year 13 modules. So when we go back in to school in September, things hopefully will be on course so that we'll get the course finished way before Easter, so we've got time to revise and go through all the required practicals again, and for us to do field work in the summer term too. Hopefully you've learned something from my Smart Learning, and hopefully I'll see you guys soon. If I get a chance to keep doing these A-level biology YouTubes, if they have been useful, please send comments to let me know that they've been useful, because if nobody's finding them useful, I will stop them. But if people are watching them and they're finding them useful and they're learning something, then please give us a comment on my comments, or send us messages through Show My Homework. Hopefully you guys are all safe and well. Take care, and I hope to see you guys either on the Zoom lessons or sometime in the summer term, if not back in September. If I haven't given you a virtual high five, this might be the last one for a while. I hope you've been finding those quizzes helpful, and I'll see you guys next time. You get a virtual high five from me.